Today we're looking at Proverbs 31, verses 1 to 9. You probably know Proverbs 31 because of the second half, which is about the wife of noble character. It's a really famous passage. But if you look closely at Proverbs 1 to 9, the first part, you see that there also is an example of a strong woman in there too. And also I'd just like to point out that Proverbs in the Hebrew arrangement of the Old Testament comes right before the book of Ruth. So we're left with the book of Proverbs finishing on a note about what it looks like to be a strong, godly woman. And then we jump into the book of Ruth, which is the second story about a strong, godly woman. And I'm just really thankful that Scripture gives us examples of what it looks like to fear God and live out our lives as women following Him. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's meet King Lemuel's mother in Proverbs 31 verses 1 to 9. The sayings of King Lemuel, an inspired utterance his mother taught him. Listen, my son, listen, son of my womb. Listen, my son, the answer to my prayers. Do not spend your strength on women, your vigor on those who ruin kings. It is not for kings, Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, not for rulers to crave beer, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and deprive all the oppressed of their rights. Let beer be for those who are perishing, wine for those who are in anguish. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So here in Proverbs 31, we're given another example of what, maybe an insight into Jewish culture, showing that wisdom is taught in the home. That parents, mothers and fathers taught their kids how to fear the Lord and live lives that are wise. We see that back in the very beginning of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 8, says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching." So, what does this mother here in Proverbs 31 have to say to her son, the king, King Lemuel? Well, she teaches him not to waste his life on chasing after women and drinking and getting drunk and living life flippantly, lest he risks losing the power that he has to make a change for the better. He's called to stand up and speak up for those who don't have a voice, to reach out for the oppressed, the poor, the needy, to be a ruler that not just cares about himself, but cares for those who do not have a voice. And so she teaches him that a king ought not use his power and his authority for his own advantage, for partying basically, but he also instead he ought to pursue justice and righteousness for his people, the people that God has given him to take care of. So I think this is a wonderful example of what biblical motherhood looks like. King Lemuel's mother teaches him right from wrong. This is a great example of when it comes to biblical wisdom, that women have a voice. That here is a mother who is teaching her son the importance of living out a life that reflects his fear of God and his care for all people. So we've got an example of God-fearing mothering. And secondly, in this book, it teaches us a little bit about how we should treat the poor and the oppressed. So the king is warned against self-indulgence and irresponsible rule. He's taught by his mother not to just serve those who can serve him, but to serve people who cannot repay him and have nothing to give in return. That's powerful, and I think while we're not kings, we too are in positions of authority. You may be an older sibling, a school prefect, maybe you're a manager at work, maybe you are living in one of the wealthiest suburbs in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We live in Narrabeen, that's probably accurate for most of us. Maybe you are a leader at a church or a voting member of Narrabeen Baptist Church. Whatever it is, we too have got some sort of authority and responsibility. And just as King Lemuel's mother teaches her son, we too ought to use that authority and responsibility to care for those who do not have a voice. So what does this mean practically? Well, let's look at Jesus. He embodied this wisdom in concern for the poor and the needy. We see that as he gave up his life for us who are spiritually poor, but also he cared about the physical and practical needs of the poor and needy in this world. So for our application, I just wanted to leave you with his words when he was at a dinner party of a prominent Pharisee. It's in Luke chapter 14, verses 12 to 14. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, Do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous.